May I welcome on the stage Sunita from UNICEF Ventures. Hello. Welcome. Sunita Grote, welcome.
Thank you so much. Great to
So,
be back.
you're a VC, but a different kind of VC, because you have backed more than 150 companies in 80 countries, but not simply chasing financial returns, not trying to ride the wave of the next hype cycle. You're doing it to back companies, well, according to your mission, early stage frontier tech from emerging markets that can benefit children and youth. And you're quantifying how you measure the social benefits. Why does the world need an NGO becoming a venture investor?
It's a very good question. Many don't know that this is what we're doing. I heard an introduction that you're mentioning that, so really great to be here. Thank you. Why does the world need that? Well, we set out and we founded the fund to be able to show how capital could be allocated differently and how we could measure value differently. So we don't often talk about return. We usually talk about value that's generated. And that value could be social value, it could be financial value, but it could also be value in the sense of technology, for instance, that's created as public goods that are available to the world. So if we look at where capital is flowing otherwise, less than 30% is going to developing and emerging markets. In fact, only about 1% is going into Africa. Just imagine that in terms of the proportion. And we know that less than 2% of venture capital is going to female-founded and female-led businesses. So there's something wrong with that picture in terms of...
And that's 2% of venture money globally going to female-founded companies.
Depending on the data. Some will say 8 or 9%, but basically we're in the single percentage ranges of how much capital is going to women. And so for us, it was really about being catalytic. We're not a massive fund, we're not huge, but we wanted to have a demonstrative effect and show how to bring to global visibility some of the ventures that are solving problems in a different way, still making money at the same time, and that are putting kind of that impact, that transparency, and that scalability at their center. And hopefully help other capital providers see those opportunities and direct their investments towards similar ventures in future.
And these are not charitable donations for a good cause. 70% of the companies you've backed are generating revenue. You've had 8 exits. Almost half of them are generating profit. Can you deliver venture-style financial returns whilst investing on inclusivity, on helping minority founders solve real problems?
Yes, we think we can. So our fund actually is not able to directly provide a return back to our LPs. That's because we trip ourselves up at the UN. We aren't as flexible as we'd like to be. But what we've been doing is we've been tracking those financial indicators through the last 10 years, and our data is showing us that basically we would be performing or outperforming often other venture capital funds that are investing in similar spaces. The other thing that we've been seeing is we've been seeing the success that our portfolio companies have in raising capital of all kinds. And actually they've been able to raise 12 times the value that we've been providing them with. And these are competitive businesses that are attracting all sorts of investments, equity, debt, but also gaining and securing significant contracts, including in their B2G models, for instance, or B2B or B2C. And so from our perspective, yes, absolutely. We had a panel earlier where we talked about the difference in investing in emerging markets, right? And so one of the key differences I would flag here is around timelines. We often see that those returns and those successes might take slightly longer time. We need patient capital to be able to do that. We also see that business models are slightly different. So often startups have to build more of the infrastructure around them to be able to succeed. They're not always operating in environments where they're given the same kind of infrastructure that other companies in more developed markets might find. And so those are some of the things that we need to bear in mind when we think about return models, but we don't think that we're compromising in any way.
And you've invested around $18 million so far, typically $100,000 as an early check, and then as the company scales up, I think you go up to about $400,000 for
Correct.
growth funding. What have you learned? What works, what doesn't work?
So I think we've learned lessons in many different ways. So one of them is around the value of transparency and the value of accountability. One of the things in our mission to be catalytic and to be an example, we've had to practice extreme accountability and transparency to our donors as well as to our startup companies. We were a startup as well at one point, and so along the way we've iterated. We are now operating in digital assets as well, and what that's helped us with is show 100% transparency from start to finish, down to how startups are utilizing the capital that we provide.
And you'll also give them the capital as crypto.
We give them the capital. So startups that come to the fund have the option of choosing. We want our seed investment in fiat, or we want it in crypto. And so that transparency has taught us a lot. It's taught us a lot about what we can learn from the startups, but it's also taught us the need to be agile and flexible, particularly in the markets that we operate in. Now, we started the crypto fund thinking it was going to be beneficial only to our partners and our donors, but actually what startups are telling us, it's hugely beneficial according to the context that they operate in. It allows them to overcome foreign exchange restrictions and fluctuations, for instance. It's allowing them to hire global talent that they may otherwise not be able to pay if they were operating in local currencies. And so for us, the ability to sort of be agile and capitalize on some of those new tools that we have is one of the massive lessons that we had. We set out to be a fund that others can learn from, and transparency was really, really, really key with that. The other piece was diversity. Coming back to that 2% number of female-founded and female-led businesses, we ourselves, our own team, would often say, "Oh, the pipeline isn't there. We just don't get that many applications from female-founded and female-led businesses." And so we did a real reflection exercise with our own team, with our processes, with our selection, all the way to our portfolio companies to understand how do we actually counter that. And we've ended up with a balanced portfolio of almost 50% female-founded and female-led businesses.
Which is really unusual in venture.
Very, very unusual. And we've worked at every stage of the selection and the pipeline to make sure that that is the case. So we've looked at our sourcing and our selection, building very deliberate partnerships at the country level and on the ground with networks that work with female entrepreneurs. We've looked at our own selection criteria. We've also, so diversity of the team is a make or break in our selection process. We also looked at language. How do you change the language of calls for applications to make it more appealing to women? There's a lot of data around job applications, for instance, where if you just put one line in that says women or people of minority groups, for instance, are particularly encouraged to apply, you significantly see an increase in the number of applications you get. So we were very, very systematic about achieving that. And it took us a few years, but we're now very proud of the fact that we have a female balanced portfolio. And among our top performing companies, most of those are female founded and female led.
How do you fund the fund? Whose money are you deploying?
We are very fortunate that we have a very diverse range of supporters to the venture fund. We, on one hand, have actually government supporters. These are particularly forward-looking governments that are interested in seeing more innovation, more representative technology solutions being used in development assistance, and so that's a big partner. We've been very fortunate to tap into kind of the crypto and blockchain ecosystem, who really appreciate the fund, particularly because we put such an emphasis, one, on supporting entrepreneurs in developing markets that are still very much underrepresented in kind of the blockchain space, and because we're looking at supporting solutions that use blockchain for good. And so they really see our venture fund there. And then we have some corporate partners as well, again, that see this as an engine to support their particular industries and supporting kind of the new solution. So it's a very motley crew of supporters that each bring resources, but also technical expertise to the table to help us.
And do they see these as donations, or do they want you to give them a 3x, a 4x, a 5x return in their bank account?
So these are technically on paper donations to UNICEF. Again, we would love to be able to provide a return, and we know that we would be able to, based on the performance of the fund, if we were legally allowed to do so. But they actually look for a different kind of return, which comes back to this idea of value return. they look for the solutions. So everything we invest in is open source. That's what we call a digital public good. And so a number of our supporters actually use some of the IP that's come out of the portfolio, either to scale it through their own networks or to contribute to their own tech stacks.
And by principle, you open source IP.
Everything is open source, driven by the portfolio companies.
Yep.
So they drive that process, they keep the attribution to them, they manage the licensing, but everything we support is open source and making money.
So you've shown that you can make money and do measurable social good. What happens next? You're raising another fund?
So we are, as some of you may know, we have very ambitious goals to reach by 2030. They're called the Sustainable Development Goals. The latest assessment is that we're falling far, far behind and we're not on track to meet them. In fact, we're looking at sort of needing I think almost 10x acceleration of efforts to be able to meet the Sustainable Development Goals, especially as they pertain to children. And we see that technology has a huge potential in helping us achieve that acceleration. So our goal is to double our traction until 2030. We're raising another 50 million. This is what our raise has been for the last 10 years, to be able to support the same number in half the time, so another 150 ventures. What we'd like to do is we'd like to increase our footprint on the growth stage. So we've done 90% of our support has been on seed stage so far, with some few exceptions in the growth stage funding. And we'd like to shift our focus more to growth stage, again, to play our role in kind of that missing middle that is so well known that a lot of ventures face in being able to scale.
And just to be clear, you're not backing good causes that are not really building. Some of the companies in the portfolio are super ambitious. There's Cloudline building autonomous airships that can go 50 kilometers for deliveries. There's companies like Weni solving localized problems, how you can translate minority languages so a company can go beyond its borders. Which are the standout investments that you've made so far that make the case for venture-based social impact investing?
So you've mentioned two of them. I think a third one that falls into that category is a company called Thinking Machines out of Southeast Asia. They're basically a data science shop, and what they've done is they've provided a number of different services to help governments as well as companies and track in real time insights that can help shape policy frameworks. So how do we use satellite imagery, mobile phone data, et cetera, to actually help a local government understand how to better target their social interventions and their policies? That would be a third one. I think the really exciting space for us is what we're seeing happening in the Web3 and financial inclusion space, and given kind of the traction that we're seeing with digital assets in emerging markets, we think that that is going to really, really grow. Those companies are really going to be growing. Our cohort of companies that are operating in that space are the financially most successful ones, so they're the ones generating the most revenue. Some of those examples include, for instance, a company out of Argentina called Excapit that has built a non-custodial wallet that functions on feature phones, so really important for markets where connectivity is still very low and smartphone access is still very low. And so that's the space that we're watching really, really closely, and it's been very interesting connecting with similar ventures here at this event as well.
And just finally, tell us how your thinking process differs from a conventional VC. When you're filtering, when you're looking for talent, you're asking some tough questions, as a VC would in a pitch session. Yeah. But what are the questions you're asking and not asking that show how different this is from mainstream venture investing?
So we're asking the startups that come to us. So we probably ask far more questions about the product than anyone expects us to. They think when they get on a pitch call with us that they're going to get UNICEF, traditional UNICEF staffers on the other end of the line. I've got a team of software developers, data scientists, AI engineers, UX designers that will really take to task most of the startups that present to us, because ultimately that is the return we're providing to our funders and our partners, is the open source IP. So we put an incredible emphasis on the quality of that IP, how it's being managed, what is the product plan. And that is something that most don't expect, I think, from us in particular. And because everything's going to be open, we need to make sure that it meets a certain level of standard and quality. The second thing, I think, is around the team. The level of emphasis we put on diversity in the team and team functioning is something we have learned over time, but it is a make or break, as I mentioned. And so we have been known to turn down companies because we're either not seeing diversity from the get-go or not even an awareness of kind of the limitations that a non-diverse team puts on a company to scale. The last thing I would say is around child rights. And so particularly if we think of AI systems, for instance, the importance of making sure that an AI system has been designed using an inclusive data set, that an algorithm has been designed in a particular way, that data privacy of children isn't being violated in the process is really crucial to us. Our brand is on that. We stand for those values, and so we take those things very, very seriously. And that's where the open source piece becomes critical for us. You can look under the hood of an open source AI system. You can't do that for a proprietary one. And so those are some of the things that we would put probably disproportionate emphasis on compared to another VC.
Wouldn't it be great if more mainstream venture funds had this mindset? UNICEF Ventures, Sunita, Grote, thank you.
Thank you so much.